Shohei Ohtani does not explode. That is the first thing you need to understand before the rest of this story makes sense. He does not raise his voice in press conferences. He does not gesture dramatically toward opposing dugouts. He does not give the sport the theatrical displays of frustration that cameras love and highlight reels are built around. In years of playing at the highest level, through beanballs and close pitches and the thousand small provocations that a player of his visibility absorbs across a career, Ohtani has maintained a composure so consistent that it has become one of the defining things about him. So when Ohtani exploded, the room went still. Not the kind of still that follows a loud moment. The kind of still that follows a quiet one, when the person who never raises their voice raises it, and everyone around them understands immediately that something has happened that was significant enough to break a pattern that had held for a very long time. 2 Phillies pitchers. 1 deliberate scheme. And Shohei Ohtani, standing in front of a microphone with an expression that the people who cover him daily said they had never seen before, saying things that he has never said before about opponents he has never addressed this directly before. Dave Roberts was already on the phone with the league before Ohtani finished speaking. The trick itself was not accidental. That is what made it a trick rather than a coincidence, the specific, coordinated quality of what the 2 Phillies pitchers did across back-to-back at-bats that revealed a plan rather than a pattern. Plans require intention. Intention requires a decision made in advance, in a dugout or a film session or a conversation between 2 pitchers who understood exactly what they were agreeing to do and did it anyway. Baseball has a long and complicated relationship with gamesmanship. The sport is old enough that almost everything has been tried at some point: the hidden ball trick, the doctored baseball, the stolen sign, the phantom tag. Some of these things are celebrated as cleverness. Some are penalized as cheating. The line between them has always been thinner than the rulebook suggests, and the sport has spent generations arguing about exactly where it falls. What the Phillies pitchers did landed clearly on the wrong side of that line. The first at-bat established the setup. Not obviously, not in a way that would have been immediately recognizable to anyone watching without the benefit of what came next. The pitch sequence was unusual but not unprecedented. The location was deliberate but defensible as competitive pitching. Ohtani fouled several off, worked the count, and eventually reached base in the way that elite hitters reach base even against sequences designed to prevent exactly that. The second at-bat revealed the scheme. Because the second pitcher did exactly what the first pitcher had done. Not approximately. Not in the general vicinity of the same approach. Exactly. The same sequence, in the same order, targeting the same location with the same pitch type at the same velocity, a duplication so precise that it could not have been produced by coincidence or by 2 independent competitors arriving at the same strategic conclusion separately. It was coordinated. And the coordination was the dirty trick. Ohtani recognized it in real time. That is the part that the Phillies pitchers apparently did not fully account for when they designed their scheme. The assumption, presumably, was that the repetition would be subtle enough, or that Ohtani's focus on individual at-bats would be narrow enough, that the pattern would not be visible to him from inside it. That assumption was wrong in the specific way that assumptions about Ohtani's baseball intelligence are almost always wrong. He is not just physically exceptional. He is not just a collection of elite physical tools arranged in a human body and pointed at a baseball. He processes the game at a level that people who haven't been inside a dugout with him struggle to fully appreciate, reading sequences, cataloging patterns, retaining information from previous at-bats with the kind of accuracy that most players develop over years and Ohtani seems to have arrived with. He saw what was happening. He saw it clearly enough that by the time the second at-bat concluded, the recognition on his face was visible to anyone watching closely. Not anger yet. Recognition first. The specific, focused expression of a man who has identified something and is now deciding what to do with the identification. What he did was finish the at-bat. Because Ohtani always finishes the at-bat. Whatever is happening around him, whatever the scheme or the provocation or the situation designed to pull his attention away from the immediate task, he finishes what he is doing before he addresses anything else. Then he went to the dugout. And the anger arrived. The Dodgers' dugout after that second at-bat was not a calm place. Robert saw Ohtani's face the moment he came through the door. He has managed Ohtani long enough to read the specific quality of his expressions, to distinguish between the frustration that comes from a difficult at-bat and the anger that comes from something that transcends individual performance. He saw the second thing. And it told him immediately that what had just happened on the field was not a matter of competitive pitching that hadn't gone Ohtani's way. Something else had happened. Something that required a different kind of response. The conversation between them was short. Ohtani explained what he had seen, the duplication, the coordination, the deliberate nature of the scheme. Roberts listened with the quality of attention he brings to things that are going to require him to act. Not just hear. Act. By the time the inning ended, Roberts had already formed the position he would carry to the microphone after the game. Not just complaint, Roberts is not a manager who complains about things that fall within the competitive boundaries of the sport. But a formal, documented, on-the-record demand for the league to examine what had happened and apply consequences that matched the intention behind it. He had seen the footage by then. He had confirmed what Ohtani described. And what Roberts saw in that footage was not ambiguous enough to treat as anything other than what it was. The press conference room after the game had a different atmosphere than the ones that follow ordinary losses or complicated wins. The reporters who came in knew something significant had happened. The word had moved through the building in the specific, rapid way that significant things move when a story is developing faster than the formal structures designed to contain it. Ohtani came to the microphone first. He sat down with the deliberate movement of a man who has decided what he is going to say and is not going to be talked out of it by the setting or the formality of the room or the awareness that his words would be quoted and replayed and examined for implications he hadn't intended. He placed his hands on the table in front of him. He looked at the reporters directly. And then he said what he had to say. The words came in the measured, careful way that Ohtani always speaks in public, translated, precise, stripped of the kind of ambiguity that allows statements to be softened in retrospect. He described what he had experienced in those two at-bats. He described the recognition of what was happening. He said, without the diplomatic cushioning that most players apply to criticism of opponents, that what the Phillies pitchers had done was not competitive baseball. It was a dirty trick. He used a version of those words. And coming from Ohtani, from the man who absorbs provocations without comment, who competes against everything the sport throws at him without reaching for public grievance, who has made composure so central to his public identity that departures from it become news in themselves, coming from him, those words hit the room like something physical. A reporter asked him if he had ever experienced anything like it before. He paused. The pause was long enough that people in the room began to wonder if he had decided not to answer. Then he said no. Simply. Without elaboration. One word that carried more weight than a longer answer would have. No. Roberts came to the microphone after Ohtani left the room. The atmosphere had not lightened. If anything, Ohtani's testimony had concentrated it, focused the specific gravity of what had happened into a smaller and denser space that Roberts now had to address directly. He didn't soften it. That was the first thing the reporters noticed. The usual managerial language, the careful, institutional phrasing that acknowledges a situation without committing to a position too specific to defend later, was absent. Roberts spoke plainly. With the directness of a man who had decided that this was not a situation that rewarded careful language. He said the Phillies pitchers had coordinated a scheme specifically designed to exploit a pattern in Ohtani's approach. He said the coordination was documented in the footage. He said the word deliberate more than once, in different contexts, with the particular emphasis of someone who wants a specific word to appear in every story written about this. And then he said what he wanted from the league. Not a review. Not an investigation that might produce a warning or a note in someone's file that would have no practical consequence on the field. A harsh penalty. His words. Harsh. A consequence serious enough to communicate to every pitcher in the sport that what the Phillies had done would not be absorbed quietly and moved past without cost. The reporters in the room wrote that word down. Harsh. Coming from Roberts, from a manager whose public language is almost always calibrated, almost always measured, almost always positioned somewhere between directness and diplomacy, that word was notable enough to anchor every story filed from that room. He had said what Ohtani needed him to say. And he had said it clearly enough that the league, reading the coverage the next morning, would understand that this was not a complaint that would resolve itself with time and silence. The league received Roberts' formal complaint before the night ended. It was documented. It was accompanied by the footage, multiple angles, time-stamped, presented in the specific organized way that formal complaints to professional sports leagues require when they intend to be taken seriously. The Dodgers had not filed it casually. They had filed it with the thoroughness of an organization that had already decided this was going to result in something and wanted the paper trail to reflect that certainty. The Phillies organization had not yet responded publicly by the time the complaint was confirmed. That silence, in a situation where a response was clearly warranted and clearly expected, said something that a statement would have struggled to say more eloquently. There was no defense available that the footage didn't immediately undercut. And so the silence held. While the league began its process. While the footage continued to circulate. While the baseball world spent the night arguing about what the right penalty looked like for two pitchers who had designed a scheme together, executed it in sequence, and apparently not considered carefully enough what would happen when the player at the center of it recognized exactly what they were doing. Ohtani had recognized it. Roberts had documented it. The league had received it. What came next would be determined in offices and hearing rooms and the formal proceedings of an institution that moves slowly but moves with weight when it moves at all. But the demand had been made. Clearly. Publicly. By the manager of the team that had been wronged and the player who had been at the center of it. Harsh. That was the word Roberts had used. The league would now decide what that word meant in practice. And the baseball world would be watching to find out.